I paid for that roof. I cooked every meal. I raised those kids while their parents chased careers. And yet, when I asked for a little more closet space, my daughter-in-law said, "Let's not forget, Margaret, you're just a guest here." Guest in the house I helped them buy, in the family I practically held together. That word echoed through me like a slap, guest, as if I was some temporary visitor, not the grandmother who'd given everything. They had me sign over my pension for the family's future. They said I didn't need my name on the deed, just my love and support, and I gave it blindly, silently. I even let them turn my bedroom into a home office, and I moved into the basement without complaint until I overheard them one night. "Once she's gone, we can remodel the kitchen." They weren't talking about a vacation, they were talking about my funeral. That's when something in me snapped. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I made a call, then I made a move they never saw coming. Let's just say by the time the dust settled, the locks had changed and I held the keys. This is how I went from being just a guest to becoming the landlord. My name is Margaret Davis. I'm 67 years old, a retired school teacher, and a grandmother of 3 beautiful kids. For most of my life, I believed in one simple rule: family always comes first. I wasn't rich with money, but I was rich in love, patience, and homemade meals. I had a little house on the edge of Trenton, New Jersey, where the kitchen always smelled like cinnamon rolls on Saturdays, and no one ever left hungry or unheard. My son Derek was my pride. I raised him alone after my husband passed away when Derek was just 10. I remember patching up his jeans, packing his lunch with silly notes, and working double shifts at school just to keep things going. He was smart, book smart, and I always told him, "Go as far as your heart and your head can take you." And he did. He got into college on scholarship, married young, and eventually settled down with a woman named Kimberly. Kimberly was polite at first. She called me Mom with a tight smile, and I convinced myself we'd grow closer. I wanted to love her like a daughter. After all, I was happy for Derek. He seemed confident, driven, and excited to start a family. Years later, when my knees started to ache and my little house became too much to manage, Derek and Kimberly offered a solution: move in with us. They had just bought a spacious 4-bedroom home in the suburbs. "It'll be perfect, Mom," Derek said. "You won't be alone anymore. You can help with the kids, and we'll take care of each other." At first, it was nice. I had my own room, the grandkids were young and full of giggles, and I filled my days with cooking, reading them bedtime stories, and folding laundry with a smile. I was happy being useful. I didn't want to be a burden. When they asked if I could chip in with the mortgage, using my retirement fund, I didn't think twice. "We're family," Derek said. "It's all ours anyway." So I gave them $128,000, my life savings. I didn't care about paperwork. I trusted them. But little by little, things began to shift. Kimberly became colder. She started making comments like, "The kids need their space," or, "You should really try going for walks more, Mom. You're always underfoot." Suddenly, my cooking was too salty, and my stories were too old-fashioned. The bedroom they gave me turned into a makeshift office. They moved me to the basement near the water heater, telling me it was cozier down there. I pretended not to notice. I told myself I was overreacting until one afternoon, I overheard Kimberly on the phone with her sister. "She's still kicking around," she laughed, "but once she's gone, we can finally do that kitchen remodel. Her money's still tied in, but Derek says it'll be worth it." I sat on the stairs holding a basket of folded towels and felt something inside me wither. All those years of giving, every dollar, every meal, every sacrifice, reduced to a remodel. I didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, I began paying attention. I found unopened letters from the bank addressed to me. They'd refinanced the house without telling me. I wasn't on the deed. I wasn't even listed as an occupant on the mortgage. I was a guest. One day, while I was dusting Derek's bookshelf upstairs, I found something wedged behind an old photo frame, a folder full of property documents. Inside were papers for a second home in upstate New York. It was in Kimberly's name only, bought with a large gift that matched exactly the amount I'd contributed for their mortgage. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to bed. I stared at the photo on the wall of our family smiling at Disneyland. I remembered how I had paid for that trip as a Christmas surprise. I remembered Kimberly crying tears of joy when I offered to babysit for their anniversary trip, and I remembered thinking, this is what love looks like. But now I saw it differently. Derek had grown into a man who took and took, never questioning where the love came from, just assuming it would always be there. Kimberly saw me as a transaction, a convenience, a stepping stone. I had given up everything without asking for a thing in return. But I wasn't done yet. What they didn't know was that years ago, I'd inherited a small rundown duplex in my sister's name. She passed away from cancer and left it to me. I never told anyone about it because I had planned to fix it up and turn it into a reading center for kids. But life got busy, and the property just sat there, untouched, paid off, quiet until now. I made some calls, found a contractor, and transferred the deed into a trust, my trust. Slowly, while Derek and Kimberly played house, I rebuilt my escape. I made it beautiful. 2 updated units, one for myself and one to rent out, hardwood floors, a cozy fireplace, a kitchen with sunlight, mine. When it was done, I went home, packed my things quietly, and moved out one afternoon while they were at work. I left behind a short letter. Dear Derek and Kimberly, thank you. Thank you for teaching me that. Love without respect is not enough. I hope you enjoy the space. By the way, I bought the mortgage from your lender. The house is under my name now. Consider this a notice. Sincerely, Margaret. At first, I kept hoping it was just stress. Derek had a demanding job in finance. Kimberly stayed busy with her yoga studio and social media brand, and the kids were growing fast. I told myself they didn't mean to overlook me, they were just distracted. But the signs were everywhere. One morning, I came upstairs to find a note taped to the refrigerator. Please don't cook before 9 a.m. Kimberly records her meditations in the morning, and kitchen noises ruin the vibe. The handwriting was hers, delicate, passive-aggressive. I stared at the note, then at the cold pan of eggs I had just made for the kids. I'd woken up early again to make breakfast for everyone, like I always did, but now even that was too loud. Next came the laundry. I used to help fold clothes because I enjoyed it, but now I found labeled baskets with names and times scribbled on them, like I was some hired help. Kids' laundry fold by Wednesday. Use fragrance-free detergent for Derek's gym clothes. There was no please or thank you, just instructions. I began to notice that I wasn't asked to help. I was expected to. They didn't even ask if I was tired. Some days I didn't sit down until dinner, but then even dinner changed. Suddenly, they started eating out more. I'd spend hours preparing a meal, pot roast, mashed potatoes, or my famous buttermilk biscuits, and they'd text from a restaurant, "Don't wait up. Doing sushi night." No apology, no leftovers eaten later, just silence. And birthdays, those hurt the most. When Derek turned 40, they threw a big surprise party. Kimberly rented out a rooftop space downtown. Everyone was there, his college friends, coworkers, even people I didn't recognize. I had helped decorate the cake and iron the kids' outfits the night before, but when I arrived, Kimberly greeted me at the door with a fake smile and whispered, "We're at capacity inside, Margaret." Fire code. Maybe just grab a plate and sit in the lobby. I sat in the hallway alone, listening to the music through the wall. My birthday came 2 months later. There was no dinner, no cake, not even a card. The kids forgot. Derek didn't mention it. Kimberly posted a picture of a smoothie with the caption, "Grateful for peace and quiet today." That was it. Still, I stayed quiet for the sake of the children. I told myself it was for the little girl who still loved to braid my hair and the boy who whispered secrets into my ear when he thought no one else would listen. They were my heart. But even the kids began to change. Once, I was reading a bedtime story when Kimberly came in and said, "Let's not get them too attached to routines with you. It makes transitions harder." I blinked at her. Transitions to what? She gave me that tight smile again and closed the door behind her. Over the weeks, she began limiting my time with them. She started phrases with, "I think it's better if," or "we need to set boundaries." It became clear she didn't want me raising her kids, only serving her household. Derek followed her lead like a shadow. He never defended me when I gently brought up how left out I'd been feeling. He sighed and said, "Mom, you're a bit too sensitive lately. Kim's just trying to keep the house in order. You should really try to be more supportive." More supportive? After everything? That was the first time I cried quietly in the basement where no one could hear. It only got worse that Christmas. Kimberly's parents came to stay. I assumed they'd sleep in the guest room upstairs, and I'd stay where I always did, but Kimberly announced one morning, "We'll need the basement for Dad's CPAP machine. It's quieter down there." She didn't ask. I told her. "Where will I sleep?" I asked, stunned. She didn't even blink. We cleared a space in the garage. "It's temporary." The garage? They had moved a cot in between the bikes and holiday boxes, no insulation, just a space heater. My name was written in marker on a little sticky note, "Grandma's bed." And that's when Derek said the words that changed everything. "Mom, just try to understand. You're part of the family, but this isn't your house. You're just staying with us. Just staying." Not a mother, not a partner, not someone who gave up her home, her savings, and her health to support this family. Just a guest. The next day, Kimberly pulled me aside. "I think it's time we start planning for your next steps," she said, handing me a brochure for an assisted living facility. "They do group yoga and book clubs. You'd like it." I stared at the glossy pictures of elderly women smiling over puzzles and bingo games. I wasn't even sick. I wasn't incapable. I was just in the way. My hands shook as I folded the brochure and placed it back on the counter. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply nodded. That evening, I began packing not just my clothes, but my dignity. They didn't know that in the months leading up to this, I had quietly visited the duplex I owned. I had walked through the empty rooms, run my fingers along the dusty windowsills, and imagined sunlight pouring into a space that finally felt like mine again. I made calls, signed contracts, transferred funds, and hired a lawyer because while they were planning my removal, I was planning my return. One day, while they were out, I sat in the living room with a notary. A document lay on the coffee table. The mortgage had changed hands, sold by their struggling lender to an anonymous buyer, me. I watched the ink dry on the paperwork that turned their house into mine. That night, when they walked through the door, I was sitting in the kitchen with a letter in hand and a key on the table. Kimberly looked confused. Derek frowned. "What's this?" he asked. I smiled. "Your new lease." It happened the week after New Year's. The Christmas decorations were still up, fake pine needles scattered the floor, and the kids' new toys were tiled in the corner like forgotten treasures. I was tidying up when Kimberly walked in holding a clipboard. "We're redoing the basement," she announced, like she was telling me the weather. "Derek says it'll increase the property value. We're going to turn it into a home gym. The contractor's coming tomorrow." I froze. Where am I supposed to go? She looked up from her clipboard with an expression I'd seen too many times. Polite, flat, final. "We've talked about this, Margaret. It's not healthy for you here. The kids need stability." "We all do." "We haven't talked about anything," I said quietly. She gave a little sigh, like this was all some inconvenience I had caused. Then she handed me a folder, just like that. Inside was a packet from a retirement village an hour away, a list of rooms, rates, photos of elderly women smiling in sunlit craft rooms, and at the very top, a letter of application already filled out in my name. I looked up at her. "You filled this out?" "I helped," she said. "Derek and I both did. It's the best option. They even have shuttles to the pharmacy." I sat down hard. My legs couldn't hold me anymore. She didn't stop. You can't keep living here like this. You need support, supervision, and let's be honest, this house isn't your responsibility. You're not the owner. Those last words landed like ice water poured down my back. Not the owner? Not the mother who gave them over $100,000 to help buy it? Not the woman who raised Derek alone, fed him, clothed him, and stood by him through every heartbreak, job loss, and move? Not even a relative, just an obstacle. I waited for Derek to come home that night. I waited with the folder still on my lap, thinking, hoping that maybe he'd say this was all a misunderstanding, that he hadn't agreed to this. But when he walked in, Kimberly greeted him at the door with a quick kiss and a nod toward me. He sighed. "Mom, let's talk," he said, like I was the one causing a problem. We sat in the kitchen while Kimberly cleaned a perfectly clean counter. Derek didn't look me in the eye. "You'll be better off there," he said. "You'll have more freedom, more people your age. It's not personal." "Not personal?" I whispered. "You're asking me to leave the house I helped pay for. You want me out of your life like I'm some worn-out coat that doesn't fit anymore." He shrugged. "We're just trying to do what's best for everyone." "You're not well." I flinched. "I'm not sick," Kimberly chimed in. "You've been forgetful, Moody. The kids don't know how to act around you anymore." I turned to Derek. "You think I'm a danger?" He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. He wouldn't look at me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hammering. When I tried to walk down to the basement, my space, my only refuge, I found the door locked from the outside. I knocked. No answer. I banged harder. Finally, Kimberly opened it a crack. "Contractors are working. It's unsafe for you to go down. My clothes are down there. We'll bring them up." She closed the door in my face. That night, I slept on the living room couch. No pillow, no blanket, just me curled up in a ball. While laughter floated down from upstairs, the next day my things were shoved into plastic bins and placed in the garage next to the holiday decorations and the trash bins. I wasn't even allowed to pack them myself. I found a picture frame, one of my favorites, with a photo of me holding Derek as a baby, cracked and tossed in with a pile of cleaning supplies. No care, no thought. It was like I had died, and they were clearing out my remains. No one asked how I was doing. No one checked to see if I had eaten. I wasn't even introduced when guests came over that week. I heard Kimberly talking to a neighbor once. "Oh, her," she said when I passed by. "She's staying with us." Sort of a long-term visitor. Visitor? The word hollowed me out. I had never felt so invisible, not when I lost my husband, not when I worked 12-hour shifts at the school, not even when I came home to an empty house after retirement. This was different. This was a razor, a slow, deliberate unmaking of everything I had ever been to them. And the worst part? I started to believe it. Maybe I was in the way. Maybe I was too much. Maybe they really didn't owe me anything. That night, I sat on the cold garage floor sorting through my things. Old letters, a baby sock I'd kept from Derek's first week of life, my wedding ring. I pressed it into my palm until it hurt. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat in silence. No more asking for respect, no more hoping for kindness. Something inside me shut off, not in anger, in finality. They had made it clear I was not wanted, not seen, not loved. And so I made a quiet vow to myself. This is the last time I'll let them make me feel like I'm nothing. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg. I would disappear, and when I came back, they'd never see it coming. I didn't leave the garage the next morning, not because I was defeated, but because I didn't need to pretend anymore. The sadness was still there, of course, but underneath it, something else had started to grow. A quiet fire, steady, controlled. I wasn't just hurt now, I was awake. They thought they'd gotten rid of me, that I'd go quietly into the arms of a retirement home, that I'd vanish like an old dream no one talks about. But they'd made a mistake, a fatal one. They underestimated the woman who built their world, the house they were living in, the one I helped them buy 5 years ago after Derek lost his job. I had more than just memories tied to it. I had paperwork. See, when they couldn't qualify for the full mortgage alone, I'd offered the down payment, $128,000 from my retirement savings, to be exact. I told them it was a gift, but I never filed it as one. My name was added to the deed as co-owner, quietly, legally. My lawyer made sure of it. At the time, Derek said, "It's just a formality, Mom. Of course, the house is yours too." Then they moved in, and I took the basement suite. I let them play house upstairs while I quietly kept the papers, originals, notarized, safe in a fireproof box. With every receipt I'd ever saved, every message about renovations I'd paid for, every bill that listed my name, they thought I was a sentimental old woman hoarding memories. I was building a case. And now, sitting on that cold garage floor, I knew exactly what to do. I reached for the locked chest buried beneath old Christmas wreaths. Inside were documents, deed copies, bank transfers, even the email where Derek said, "Mom, we can't do this without you." I called my attorney the next morning, Mason Davis. He had helped me after my husband passed away, sharp, patient, and kind. The kind of man who doesn't laugh when a retired substitute teacher says, "I need to protect what's mine." "Margaret," he said after I explained everything, "this is your house as much as theirs. If they've tried to remove you, you've got every legal right to take action." I smiled, not out of revenge, but out of relief. "I don't want to destroy them," I told him, "but I want to make sure they never treat me or anyone else like I'm disposable." He understood. That week, I started keeping to myself even more. I played the part of the fading old woman, quiet, distant, agreeable. I didn't argue, I didn't protest. I even nodded politely when Kimberly reminded me that the shuttle from Maple Grove Senior Living leaves every Friday. But I wasn't packing for Maple Grove. I was preparing to become their landlord. At night, I researched tenant laws, eviction clauses, and inheritance rights. I reviewed the terms of the original mortgage and how co-ownership applied. I even updated my will. I also began journaling, documenting every conversation, every exclusion, every locked door and snide comment, evidence, proof. Kimberly had no idea that her coldness, her little barbs, "Maybe it's best you don't come to the school play. It's for immediate family," were becoming legal ammunition. Neither did Derek when he handed me a printed lease for Maple Grove and said, "They'll waive the deposit if we act fast." I looked him in the eyes, nodded slowly, and said, "Thank you for thinking of me." It was the last time I'd thank him for anything. I wasn't leaving. They were, but not yet. I wanted to see if there was anything left of the son I once raised. I gave them 2 more weeks to treat me like a human being, to remember who I was, to realize their mistake. But nothing changed. In fact, things got worse. They began moving exercise equipment into the basement. My old sofa, the one I slept on after my chemo, was pushed into the garage, replaced by a treadmill and a mounted TV. One day, I saw Kimberly and a friend drinking smoothies down there, laughing in yoga pants, talking about reclaiming space. I had reclaimed space too, just not the kind they expected. By week 3, Mason had prepared the paperwork. All I had to do was sign. I looked at the line where my name would go, then I looked around the garage at the bins, the boxes, the cracked photo frames, and dusty quilts. I signed. That night, I wrote Derek a letter, not an angry one, a clear one. It said, I helped you build this life I gave without asking. I sacrificed without condition. You didn't just forget that, you erased it. But I'm not gone, and I'm not powerless. The papers you ignored, the woman you dismissed, she's still here. Legally, this house is mine too. So tomorrow, things will change, not because I want revenge, but because I've remembered who I am. I slipped the letter under his door and I waited for morning. Morning came with the usual suburban hum, lawnmowers droning, children off to school, Kimberly pacing the kitchen in her robe with coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. Derek was still in bed, but I was already dressed, hair brushed, blouse pressed, shoes shined. I looked like I was going to church or court because today I wasn't their house guest anymore. I was the landlord. At 9 a.m. sharp, Mason arrived in a crisp navy suit, leather briefcase, calm eyes. He parked on the street, walked up the driveway, and knocked on the front door like a man on a mission. Kimberly answered, blinking at him. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to speak with Margaret Wallace and her tenants," Mason said politely, stepping inside before she could say another word. "Tenants?" The word rattled through the hallway like thunder. I stood behind him, holding a folder of my own. Kimberly turned to me, confusion spreading across her face. "What's going on?" "I'd like you and Derek to come into the living room," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk." By the time Derek joined us, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, Mason had already laid out 3 folders on the coffee table, each one neatly labeled. One for Derek, one for Kimberly, one for me. Mason cleared his throat. "Let's begin." He flipped open the folder and pulled out the deed to the house, complete with both owners' names, mine and Derek's. "This property is legally co-owned by Margaret Wallace," he began. "As such, any decisions regarding living arrangements, renovations, or financial commitments require her explicit consent." Kimberly narrowed her eyes. "Wait, what?" "I never signed over my rights," I said. "And I kept every receipt, every email, every transfer. I gave you help, not a handout." Derek's face turned pale. Mason continued, "Furthermore, due to recent actions that suggest attempted unlawful eviction and elder coercion, Ms. Wallace has grounds to pursue legal action." He glanced at me, and I nodded. "She has chosen an alternate route." Kimberly scoffed. "What, kicking us out?" I looked at her. "Not yet." I opened my folder and pulled out a document. It was a new lease agreement. "I'll be moving back into the main bedroom," I said. "You and Derek can have the basement if you choose to stay. The rent will be fair, below market value in fact, but it won't be free." Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I wasn't finished. "Alternatively," I continued, "you can leave within 30 days. Either way, this is no longer your house." It never truly was. Silence. For once, Kimberly had nothing to say. I looked at Derek, my son, my boy, who I'd once rocked to sleep. A 1-bedroom apartment during a snowstorm because we couldn't afford heat. My boy, who used to call me Supermom, couldn't even meet my eyes. "I warned you," I said softly. "I gave you time to remember who I was, but you treated me like a burden, like an outsider, like a guest in a home I helped build." Kimberly stood up. "You can't do this. We have a life here." "You had one," Mason replied coolly. "Now you have options." Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. It was the HOA president, Diane, a nosy neighbor who had always admired Kimberly's elegance and hosted endless garden parties. She had arrived for their monthly brunch meeting, and, behind her, 2 more neighbors followed. I didn't plan the timing, but I didn't stop it either. "Oh, are we early?" Diane asked, peeking inside. Kimberly rushed to block the door. "We're, running late, Diane." But I stepped forward. "Actually, come in. I'd love to share something." And just like that, the setting was public. The neighbors sat down, sipping mimosas and waiting for brunch to start. Instead, they got a front-row seat to Kimberly and Derek's unraveling. I calmly explained my co-ownership, the new lease, and the legal standing I'd maintained all along. By the end of it, Diane blinked in stunned silence. "Oh my," she said. "I always thought you were just visiting." "I'm the homeowner," I said with a smile. "Always have been, just not always respected." Kimberly's face was crimson. Derek stood, jaw tight. "You didn't have to do it like this." I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks. "I didn't have to," I said, "but I chose to because you needed to learn your mother is not disposable." They left the brunch in silence, faces down, whispers trailing behind them from every neighbor. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and poured myself a cup of tea. The house was quiet still. It didn't feel like victory, it felt like truth. I had never wanted revenge, only recognition, dignity, respect, and now I had it without shouting, without begging, just the law, the truth, and a woman finally done being small. In the days that followed, silence fell heavier than any shouting match could have. No slammed doors, no stomping feet, no passive-aggressive comments, just the quiet of truth settling in. Derek and Kimberly chose to move out. They lasted a week in the basement, sulking and whispering like teenagers punished for bad behavior. But by the next Friday, a moving truck pulled up. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't have to. The weight of their choices hung in the air long after the truck disappeared down the street. Words spread fast. Diane, the HOA president, tried to stay neutral, but she couldn't help gossiping. By the next neighborhood gathering, everyone knew not just that I owned the house, but that I had always owned the house in silence while being treated like an unwanted guest. Neighbors who used to overlook me now offered warm smiles and gentle nods. Some even apologized, though they had nothing to do with it. Margaret, one woman, whispered, "I was at the grocery store. You're incredible. I wish I had your strength." I didn't feel strong. I just felt whole for the first time in years. But the consequences didn't end with public embarrassment. Derek's life unraveled quickly. Without the house, he and Kimberly had to move into a small rental an hour outside of town. The commute to their kids' school became a nightmare. Kimberly's job as a remote stylist started suffering. Clients canceled and referrals dried up after whispers of how she treated her mother-in-law. They had to pull their oldest out of private school. Derek reached out 2 weeks later with an email. "I'm sorry. I was stressed and scared, and I took it out on you. I never meant to push you away. We're falling apart out here. Please talk to me." I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. Then I sat at the kitchen window watching a squirrel dart across the lawn. I didn't reply that day or the next. Eventually, he called and left a message. Then Kimberly called, and then their oldest daughter, pleading, crying, swearing it was all a misunderstanding, that they were just trying to help me transition. I never blocked them, but I didn't let them back in. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetfulness, and trust, once shattered, has to be earned in pieces, not demanded in bulk. I didn't want them to suffer, but I needed them to learn. A few months passed, and the holidays came and went. For the first time in years, I didn't cook for anyone else. I didn't host. I didn't set an extra plate and hope someone showed up late, pretending it was traffic. Instead, I made my favorite stew, lit candles, and watched old Christmas movies with a blanket over my lap and peace in my heart. It was quiet, but not lonely. Sometimes I'd hear laughter outside, neighbors walking their dogs, kids on bikes, and I'd smile, not because I'd won, but because I'd remembered something they tried to make me forget. I matter. Not because I gave money, not because I sacrificed, but because I am me, a woman who survived, who rebuilt, who refused to be erased. I still see Derek from time to time. Once at the grocery store, he looked thinner, tired. He smiled at me, soft and unsure. I nodded gracefully, not bitter, not angry, just steady. He's trying. I can see that now. Little things, a holiday card in the mail, a thank you note after I sent a birthday gift to his daughter. I don't open all the doors, but I leave the porch light on just in case. Because even after everything, I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to remember who I am and to never forget again. So now when people ask what happened, why I live alone in a big house so full of warmth and light, I tell them the truth. They called me just a guest, so I became the landlord, and then I became free. Spring came early that year. The cherry blossoms on Elm Street bloomed in soft pink clouds, and the breeze carried that faint, hopeful scent of something new. It was the kind of season that made you feel like life was trying again, and maybe in a way, I was too. It started with a letter. I'm Derek, not from Kimberly, but from my granddaughter Ella, the youngest, only 15. Handwritten in crooked cursive on lavender stationery. Dear Grandma, I know everything that happened. I saw how Mom talked about you, and I didn't say anything. I was scared, But I miss you so much. I miss your stories. I miss your pancakes. I miss you. Please write back. Love, Ella. I held the letter for a long time, folded, unfolded, read, reread. My hands trembled, not from age, but from a quiet ache I hadn't allowed myself to feel. And then I smiled. I wrote her back the next day, simple things at first. What flowers I'd planted in the garden, the old family recipe for molasses cookies, the name of the book I was reading. She replied with drawings, poems, little updates about school. After a few weeks, she asked if she could visit, just her, and so she came. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, nervous, clutching a homemade card, I felt something crack open in my chest. She ran into my arms like it had only been yesterday. We spent the whole weekend together baking, gardening, laughing. She asked questions, real ones, about my childhood, about Grandpa, about what happened with her parents. I told her the truth gently, and she understood more than I expected. I think people forget grandmas are still people, she said quietly, holding my hand. I kissed her forehead. Some people forget, others remember and make it right. That moment didn't undo the pain, but it softened it like warm light on a scar. It reminded me why I'd endured, not for revenge, but for dignity, for the right to take up space without apologizing. Later that year, I made another choice. I met with Mason and finalized a donation, not to Derek or Kimberly, but to a local women's shelter. I gave them enough to expand, renovate, and name a wing in honor of my late husband, the Franklin Wallace Resilience Center, a space for women like me who had been told they were just guests in someone else's life. A place where they could rebuild, not just survive. People asked if I wanted to move, downsize, travel, but I stayed in the house I helped build, the one I was once pushed out of and then reclaimed. Because this wasn't just real estate, it was proof that quiet strength can outlast loud cruelty. That justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers, waits, and arrives with paperwork in hand. That love, when it's honest, doesn't demand power, it offers peace. I still get cards from Ella. We talk every week. She's applying to college soon and wants to study social work. Sometimes I wonder what her parents think when she tells them she's been here. Maybe it stings, maybe it teaches. Either way, I don't carry the burden anymore. I've laid it down because I've learned that boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks, and I hold the keys now. So, if you ever feel small in your own story, if someone ever calls you just a guest in the life you helped build, remember me. Remember Margaret Wallace, the woman who didn't slam the door. She owned it, and quietly, gracefully. I changed the locks. What would you have done if your own family treated you like an outsider in the very home you helped build? Do you think I went too far, or did I finally take back what was always mine? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest stories. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember their worth.